Good morning, everyone. I'm Chloe Tetro. I'm the health coach here in Ready Care, and welcome to this morning's podcast. Today, we will be looking at taking stock, what that means, and why it's important at this time of year. So, it's something I've come across quite a bit, and I suppose we all have up to a point coming into the darker season, which unfortunately I hate to say it, but we are getting there. The darkening of days tend to have a little bit of an effect on people, whether that be diminished motivation and drive or just feeling a little bit lackluster, more so than we usually would be. So, what I mean by taking stock is really having a good look at where we're at in terms of if where we want to be and where we're currently at is aligning. If there are any energy zappers in our environment, and really having a look and giving ourselves that gift of checking in with ourselves, checking in with our habits, checking in with what we're utilizing during our day in terms of energy expenditure, and seeing if it's serving us or maybe taking a little bit from where we want to be at. So the benefits of stock taking or taking stock would be massive. So let's have a look at the inverse first. If we are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, let's say, and that can happen as we can be kind of steered off our usual course through something that's totally out of our control, whether that be a family emergency, whether that be a holiday, whether that be, things that are thrown at us in life that we don't particularly have control over. That can really knock us off course. And sometimes it can just be a case of a few weeks go by and we've kind of lost control, let's say, over the overall picture of what we would usually be on top of, and we can find tasks really kind of starting to overwhelm. Or it can just be a case of you kind of go a few days and go, cheekus, I'm kind of in the stage where I'm just keeping my head above water. And it's really kind of giving that a little bit of space. The inverse of not taking stock, let's start with that. So there's a massive feeling of overwhelm can be the biggest factor, and that will represent itself in what I've dubbed the wave of doom, where you need to do X, Y, and Z. And the more stressed you are, which is the second point that it brings up, not taking stock can bring up our stress levels quite a bit. So you're overwhelmed, you're stressed, and eventually what that can start to do is corrode our feelings of happiness and well-being. The more we sit with that kind of pervasive overwhelm, the less energy we generally have. So if you can think back of a few weeks ago, we chatted about utilizing energy well in the brain. The more we ruminate on something, and we tend to do that when we're a little bit overwhelmed, the more we ruminate, the less energy we tend to have. And you might notice that in your own life at periods where you may have felt a little bit overwhelmed is zapped, energy levels go right down, and that can have a kind of catch-22 where there's a bit of a vicious cycle happening. So you've no energy to tackle the things, and the things are piling up and you've no energy. So that can kind of interplay a little bit. But if you can hark back to hark, where did I get that word from? If you can think back of your school days and starting, or even your work days, when you've been given quite a complex project and there's a lot of moving parts to it, usually the best starting point is to sit down and make a little plan. And that can be your run-of-the-mill spider diagram, or it can be, whatever works for you. And what that tends to give is the inverse of the kind of negative aspects. So you'll gain a lot more clarity on what you need to do. And, a lot of the times people can think, oh, I know what I need to do. It's all up here. But remember, the more something is up here, the more you tend to ruminate. So the more you ruminate, the more tired you are. So it can really give a sense of clarity around what needs to be done. It can give you perspective on what is manageable. With that, you can regain a little bit of control and authorship, because once you have, let's say, even a set of tasks, let's take it from a purely practical standpoint. Once you have a set of tasks, you can start to add those, not all in one day, because they didn't amass in one day, let's be honest. It can take weeks and sometimes months for lots of different things to be added to the expansive to-do list. So giving yourself maybe one task a day, or maybe even one task every 2 days, if you're in a bit of a burnout stage, can really kind of place yourself back on a trajectory of regaining a level of control. And I like to use the monthly calendars, do you know, where you might drop one thing on a Tuesday, one thing on a Friday, because you have a bit more space. Um, you'll be able to course correct. And this is kind of the main point that I'd like to chat about in terms of taking stock. You will have greater day-to-day enjoyment. And there's a number of studies done about this in terms of the ability to have a clear understanding of where you are currently at, where you want to get to, and what needs to be done in between to really bring up your experience of enjoyment. And really that can be a lot of what our life boils down to, is how well do we experience our day to day? How much enjoyment are we getting from the day to day? And it just seems like an awful shame to go through day by day by day by day in that constant state of stress and overwhelm. If there are steps, now I know there's mitigating circumstances sometimes in life, but if overall there are steps that can be done to help you to gain more enjoyment out of life, it would be an awful shame not to. So for those that would be familiar with the concept of grow, GROW. It's used a lot in just even basic coaching, things at a school level. That is, or work level, excuse me. That would be G for goal, or for reality, so where you are now, O for options, and W can stand for wrap up, or ways to go about it. So identifying where you want to go and taking that as a broader picture, where you want to be at in your life, what is important to you, what do you want to have more of in your day, what do you feel? And I don't just mean in terms of productivity, because sometimes I think that can be a bit of a moot point. Is a goal doesn't have to be something you accomplish. It doesn't have to be something like run a marathon, do this, do that. It doesn't have to be an addition. Sometimes a goal can be a subtraction. Sometimes a goal can be, I need to rest more, actually. I'm coming into winter, I'm a little bit shot, and I don't give myself time to actually rest. And sometimes sadness and lack of rest can present in quite similar ways. So identify what you want. What is the goal here? And when you're taking stock, having clarity is really the number one. Secondly, look at where you currently are at. And that can be looking at, what are normal days like for you? Are there parts in your day that are a habit to you that maybe aren't particularly serving where you want to be at? Which brings me to my third little heading. Habits are primarily physical. So, what do I mean by that? Um, when a habit is deeply ingrained to the point where it is part of your everyday, it's dropped down into your body. It's dropped to the fact that every day you'll reach for your cup of coffee, you'll stick on the kettle around the same time. Every day you'll do your brushing of the teeth. You tend to, the things that you repeat most have become a physical sensation in the body. And that's a brilliant thing if you've worked on a habit like going for a walk every day. Your body is going to want to go for a walk. You're going to gain some pleasure from that. Two little habits that I've taken stock of that I have that tend to promote a certain state, which I have found um, maybe doesn't go with what my main goals would be. Is number one, sitting on my bed. And some of you might resonate a little bit to this, is in the evening, if I sit on my bed, I'm done. So I've noticed that if I sit on the bed, it tends to be the phone comes out, I start doom scrolling, as it's affectionately known, and I could be there for an hour, 2 hours, I'm ashamed to say, but it's the truth. Um, so I've noticed that that physical action of sitting on the bed will have a repercussion in what I want to achieve for that evening, because I've associated my bed with rest time. This is it. We've nothing else to do that day and it's time to rest. Now, as I said, sometimes that's exactly what the body needs. But if you have greater goals and orientations for that day, just being aware of, are there physical triggers for you that bring on a certain state of mind? And are those peppered throughout your week or your days in ways that you can start to take stock of and go, okay, is that actually serving what I want to be doing? A second little one that I'll just throw in, just because I've only noticed over the last while, is I wear glasses, so I'm wearing contacts now. If I wear my glasses, it also signals the exact same thing. It signals it's bedtime, because I only ever have them on in the morning before my day starts, or in the evening when it's time to go to sleep, wind down, read a book. So what I've noticed is in the morning, I find it very difficult to get going until I put my contact lenses in. And it's that kind of tie-in of a physical action has a behavioral component part to it. Now, I'll have a quick chat about the behavioral components. And I've talked about dopamine loads, but actually let's have a look at the inverse of dopamine for a second, because dopamine is great in getting us going to do things when there's an anticipated reward. So when we know that we are going to gain a reward, like, let's say, sitting down in the evening and watching a show with your family or with your partner or just with yourself, and you've been looking forward to it, it's part of your daily ritual, you know you're going to get a little bit of a boost from that, and you're going to start looking forward to it. And dopamine is a great neurochemical that's going to actually drive you to action. So there's a bit of a action part of it. It's what brings you from one state to the next state, is that draw, that desire, that pull. Now, where people can start to find there is a little bit of a demotivation that starts to happen, especially around this time of year, is dopamine loves novelty. And for any of you that would have started things like a course, and it's that time of year, I think it's ingrained in us from being babas that, September means it's like the 2nd January, we start something new, we start this new kind of chapter. What you might notice if you've ever done a food, dietary, lifestyle change, an exercise plan, a class, all of these type of things, in the beginning stage, you get a massive high from it. There's a massive novelty aspect and your brain loves that. And you'll notice as you go through, usually around November, at the 4th or 5th week, which I hear back from clients actually in terms of that's the first wall people tend to hit. But that happens throughout our lives. When the novelty factor dips, our reward system from dopamine starts to go down. We still have an urge, we still want to do it, but actually there's what's called the diminishing returns on dopamine. So each time you do it, you start to get a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less, going on and on. So you'll start to go, jeepers, I used to really enjoy this. I'm not really understanding what I've done differently here. How is, why am I enjoying this less? So novelty is a huge, huge factor here. If you want to harness the power of that reward dopamine system, bringing in a little bit of novelty into an established positive habit is going to really help you. So in the umbrella of taking stock, if there are particular things that you do habitually, including going for a walk or whatever it might be, that's actually quite a positive habit, starting to tweak it ever so slightly will actually make sure that the novelty doesn't quite wear off. Whether that means inviting a friend sometimes, whether it means putting on different music, keep, listening to a specific podcast where there's a different episode each time. All of these things that interrupt your brain's boredom, basically, with the habit, are really going to help. So in that taking stock, if you are starting to see that specific positive habits you've implemented are getting a little bit humdrum, and you're having difficulty keeping up that level of motivation, that can be one of the ways that you can look after that diminishing return, feed it a bit more novelty, and then it's going to start to build up that reward again. There was a really interesting study done on musicians. So they were orchestral musicians, and they had to rehearse a piece over and over and over and over again. And it was found that the musicians started to not enjoy it. Now, they might love their craft, they might love their instrument, but because of the repetition, they were finding that the enjoyment was going and actually was translating. So the audience members were able to pick up that kind of lacklusteredness. So they were asked in this experiment to continue to play the piece note correctly. But the task each musician was given was to change the way that they played ever so slightly so that only they would notice. So only they would notice, nobody else would notice. And what that created was a kind of presence. It created a novelty factor for them. The musicians themselves enjoyed playing way, way more, and the audience enjoyed listening to it a lot more because it was received a lot better. Which brings me on to serotonin. Just talked about dopamine. I seem to talk about dopamine an awful lot, but that's because it's exceedingly important. But serotonin would be what those musicians would have experienced. It's a type of presence. It's locking into where you are currently at, what is inherently enjoyable about it. And serotonin is implemented in happiness. So for any happiness studies, it's usually serotonin is the one that is looked at. So if you can remember, I described dopamine as getting you from here to here. So there's that action, right, of going forward, which is fantastic for drive, pull. But a little bit of a drawback with it is that it kind of sticks you in that kind of scarcity. It's implied in that reach for that what you have now is not enough and you need more. So we can see that the implications where dopamine and the likes of addictions can come in. Whereas serotonin is the opposite. Serotonin is all about being happy where you are now. For those that practice meditation and mindfulness, it's really serotonin that's been kicked into gear there. Serotonin would be more looking back at where you were at and seeing what you have gained. So what you've gained in between, that would be kind of the differentiating factor between the two neurochemicals. And what you're going to find with that is your happiness levels are going to go up. You're going to be more in the moment with things. So if you're looking at it again under the umbrella of taking stock, it's looking at what is working for you and giving yourself a few prompt questions. So when people take stock, it's a good idea to maybe start from the position of, we mentioned the grow model. So where do you want to go? Where are you currently? And what are the options in between? So what you want to do here is really harness the power of serotonin to work for you, and a little bit of the dopamine as well. So I'll chat you through that a little bit. With a happiness study, actually, that was conducted in Stanford, and there's a great video on a TED Talk if you have a look at the happiness study. There is 3 important components of identity that we all place as right up there. They're fundamentals to how we view ourselves and our experience in the world. So like I was saying a while ago, it's really, we want to maximize our experience as best as possible. We want to mitigate stress, bring down the overwhelm, and make sure that we have clarity, that we're moving in the direction that will bring us the most joy, whether that be attaining goals or something like taking away things and getting yourself into a restful state. So the three important factors would be who we are, what we believe in, and what we do. And one of the best ways to fast track happiness, let's say, if that's, I cringe at saying that, but look at, is to connect those dots, to see who we are and what we believe is connected to what we actually do. And that's really the kind of crux of why taking stock is massive. You get to course correct, but you also really get to have a look and see, is what you want, what you believe, what is important to you, matching what you're doing? And if it isn't, is there something you can do incrementally? That it's the law of 1% again. We don't have to beat ourselves up. We don't have to go, jeepers, I should have been a dancer. You don't have to beat yourself up for where you currently are. It's just about making sure that there's a continuous move towards a fuller experience of your life. So a few questions to ask yourself when you are taking stock is, where did you start and what have you achieved? So even give yourself a timeline, because that's quite vague actually. Think of it in terms of 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, where were you at? And really harness that serotonin. What have you achieved since? Give yourself some time, write down a few points, even write down 3 points, but really tapping into that to see there has been movement, and where you are currently is a good place to be at. See the value in what you've helped others to achieve. And I think that's a good point as well in terms of kicking ourselves out of our one person. We can be very hard on ourselves and very stuck in a particular way. See what you've achieved and what that has helped others, how that has helped others, I should say. What have you learned in that 2-year period? What have you learned insofar as experiences you've gained? What did you leave behind? Where were you at 2 years ago that wasn't particularly serving you, that you kind of go, jeepers, I do less of that now? That's great, actually. And sometimes it's as simple as like taking stock in terms of here and now is good. Serotonin goes up, Serotonin goes up, happiness levels go up. Happiness levels go up, stress and overwhelm goes down. Stress and overwhelm goes down. Fatigue tends to subside somewhat. So already you have more energy, you're feeling happier. If there are particular tasks that you want to undertake, action tasks, let's say, you're coming at it from a place where already your brain circuitry is firing at a lot better level to help you with your goals than it would have been prior, when you're in that demotivated stage, overwhelmed, stressed. You're coming at it from a very different angle. So even if you do spot specific things in your life that you go, oh yeah, sitting on the bed now, that turns into a 2-hour venture for me. Okay, a very simple thing is, don't sit on the bed, move around, go somewhere else, so there's a presence to that will help you get into a state where you're much, much better equipped to deal with any changes that you need to make, and really coming at it from a space that is a lot happier, more satisfied, and having that distance of being able to, instead of focusing purely on the scarcity of what do I need to do, but to actually go, what have I achieved? What have I done? And to give yourself the option to really sit into that and be excited about what's ahead, instead of that being another hurdle thrown at you, that you can kind of course correct, go, no, these particular things in my life are really important to me. So I'm going to connect the dots, and I'm going to go, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. What I believe in here being what is important to me. And these are the actions that I'm doing. And there is a cascade effect with these things. Is the more often you place yourself in a position where you are doing something bringing you closer to what is important to you, the more the cascade effect is of believing that you are moving in a direction that is meaningful and purposeful. And meaning and purpose is what drives most of us and creates a greater depth of experience and satisfaction for us. So that's the kind of go with that. A closing statement, jeepers my words today, lads. A closing thought that I would leave with people is to apply design thinking. So this is very popular in the world of design, is how can we make this object better? How can we make it more enjoyable for people? How can it be more seamlessly traversed? To really give yourself the gift of applying design thinking in your own life. Go from reacting purely as a passive reaction, and like everybody does that. It's human nature. We get into specific habits and we turn to a reactionary point. But give yourself the gift of design thinking. Design where you want to be at. Take stock of where you're at, what you've already achieved, where you want to be, and if there are anything in between that can help you move that 1% towards it. Yeah, that's I think that's me. Have I covered everything? Let's have a quick look. I have for today, and sure, look, we're at the 27 mark, so we're nearly a half hour. So thanks very much for those who tuned in, much appreciated, and thank you for your time. If you have any comments or questions, please fire them my way, and otherwise I will be speaking to you in 2 weeks' time. Andrew's back with you now next week, and thank you very much for your time. Have a lovely day.